You are.
Who Dat Nation, Chris Vogel and John Hendricks here, Boot Crew Media, another pregame show. Saints 49ers is going to be a big game here. First off, great history between these two teams when they get together. Also a little bit different. You have the 49ers who are kind of surging right now. Saints still trying to find back-to-back wins for the first time this season. Maybe this is the day that they do it. John, just going into this one just off the bat, what's kind of your early lean heading into what's going to be probably maybe the hardest game left on the schedule for the Saints?
Yeah, I think them and the Eagles are probably the hardest ones left. But, getting over this hurdle, we can tell a lot about this team based on how they come out today, right? If they can win, look, that could potentially set them up over the next couple. We got Tampa, obviously, and you got Atlanta behind them and such. So it's a really important game. And so I think that's the biggest thing is that, like, last week, this team was having a cut it loose mentality, just kind of, what do we got to lose type of thing. And look, I think those types of teams are kind of dangerous down the stretch. And so the big thing, and obviously the big challenge, is can they match up defensively against the 49ers offense? I think that's the chess match that we're looking forward to. And look, I think if you would have started at the beginning of the year or even last year, you felt really good about where this defense was and how they did match up. But, look, it remains to be seen today. Hopefully they're getting healthier on the injury front. Some players are supposed to play today. They didn't use elevations on particular players, which means, usually good indications for health. But look, this is going to come down to, can the defense do enough to stop the 49ers offense, and can the offense continue success and put points up on the board? That's really going to be what this game comes down to. I think the Saints, obviously, Vegas doesn't see it that way. I think they're 11.5-point underdog. I don't know if that's going to necessarily hold, but the 49ers are riding a hot hand. The Saints, can they put back-to-back wins together? That's really what we're trying to find out.
You mentioned Vegas. Yeah, this thing opened up at 9.5, and that's a big number, obviously. And I know the Saints' record isn't great, but there haven't been many blowout losses this year for them. So I kind of it was a shocking number when you see it. You mentioned the health part of things. First week, I would say maybe since the start of the season that the Saints got more good news than they did bad news. So let's kind of go down the list and start with two big ones right here. Cam Jordan and Alvin Kamara both expected to play. What was kind of the vibe in the locker room for the two of them? I know last week we talked about Cam having to miss the game because of the eye injury. And then I believe Alvin was dealing with an illness, but that seems to be kind of off to the side now. So what'd you kind of get in terms of them in the locker room and just going into this game, how they felt?
Well, I mean, Kamara, as far as it goes, I mean, it was just one of those illnesses, and DA talked about it, that saying that, hey, he's going to be fine. And with Jordan, look, he wanted to play last week, right? And, dealing with the orbital bone fracture and such and such. I mean, that's never a good sign. We talked about it after Pittsburgh. His eye was kind of swollen shut and such. But, look, he's on the mend, and this team needs him. And right. And this is a point of the year, you could have a lot of guys check out, but, competitors like Cam and guys like that, they're going to play through injuries, whatever the case may be, because you're looking at a lot of these guys that aren't 100% on this roster that are going to be playing. And that's just how it's going to be till the end of the year, that, you're going to learn after the year that players are going to play with injuries and such. But look, getting Cam back is huge. I thought Carl Granderson stepped up in a big way last week. It remains to be seen what the share load is going to be like for these guys. But, the Saints have always used a rotational approach. So maybe, we'll keep an eye on Marcus Davenport with a calf injury. But look, Jordan's good to go from what we understand. And I'm sure that's going to be a big boost for the Saints defense. And look, they're going to need it in all aspects, because they're going to have to solve for Deebo Samuel and obviously Christian McCaffrey. Those are no easy feats for sure. But, look, I feel like their health is trending upwards. No Lattimore is expected today. Again, he's coming back from those. The kidney injury and the ribs injury, but just in time, hopefully, for a Mike Evans show. So it's going to be interesting, because they also activated Trevor Penning. I don't think his role is kind of defined yet, and then Bradley Roby, because I think the secondary has been doing pretty well with Taylor and Adebo. So I don't know if you say Roby's definitely going in the slot there, or they're going to ease him in and then you relegate guys like Chris Harris to special teams. It's really going to be interesting to see where this defense kind of goes. But health is really, 3 players only ruled out. That's kind of nice going into this year, how it's been.
Yeah, especially after we look at the Rams game last week and we're going down the injury part. We're like, that guy's not playing, that guy's not playing. So definitely a complete 180 there. You mentioned Lattimore. I kind of felt like, you've been on top of this thing the whole time in terms of, like, I remember the Monday night game against the Ravens. You're like, yep, not going to be ready for that one. So they have another Monday night next week. You talked about the Bucs game. Ideally, that's probably the spot to return. Gets another 7-8 days to kind of heal up and make sure he's ready. And also, you mentioned the Mike Evans matchup. Just seems like is that the best spot for him to come back?
Yeah, look, and he's been wanting to play. That's the thing, and so everything I've told is that look, he was seeing his own. I know lots made about medical staff. He had his own doctors that he was visiting too, but you got to understand that this is a kind of a freak injury. You got ribs on one thing, and then obviously the lacerated kidney. I mean, that's no joke, right? And so, that's unfortunate. But look, him getting out to practice this week was big. Talked about and reported that he was going to be trying to practice, and it's really one of those things where he's trying to figure out, how it was going to be from a pain tolerance perspective with pads on. Now he's starting to run and stuff, but limited all week. Good sign. Good sign going into next week. And obviously, the storyline with Mike Evans. I think Lattimore should be good to go for Tampa. But look, again, it brings an interesting dynamic because I think Taylor and Adebo have been playing pretty well together. And so, really a good problem to have when you have the depth. And again, we're kind of getting back to the point where, hey, the squad might be 100%, as best as they can look going down the stretch, but is it too little too late?
Yeah, and you mentioned those three cornerbacks. The beauty of that is, yeah, we'd like to see them all on the field at the same time this season, but they're also young too, so the upside there is obviously great. You mentioned Trevor Penning. You talk about easing him in. I guess that's the way to kind of do it. Do you think this is probably one of those situations where maybe he's that kind of jumbo package offensive lineman you bring in just to get in some snaps, get him acclimated, and who knows, maybe mid to late December, you can kind of up that usage for him?
Yeah, look, I mean, so James Hurst is back from concussion, so that's the good news that he's going to start at left tackle. And as far as Andres Pete triceps injury, we'll have to keep an eye on that for sure and see how that's going to work out. But look, getting Penning back in the lineup, even if he does, is activated, it would probably be in the swing jumbo type of stuff. Just having him available is a good thing. You saw Andres Pete that look, because they were down so bad in injuries, he was active last week, but it didn't see any snaps, obviously. And so, look, I think this offensive line is got it done. I think that they'll get what they can out of Penning, whether it's special teams or maybe some jumbo sets and stuff. But just get him into a quick thing. But I don't think they're in a situation where they have to hurry him on the field or have to get him onto the field just to get him reps in a long capacity. And again, the Saints MO, when you get guys coming back from injury, they don't necessarily get a ton of snaps. So we'll see how it kind of plays out. But look, Penning is obviously their future guy. And so you've seen how injuries now, 2 years in a row have decimated this team, and depth is so important. So it's going to be interesting to see what his role is going forward, but it's probably going to be more in that jumbo swing when we do see full unleashed Trevor Penning. And honestly, it might open up a few things in the run game just because of how well he does in run blocking. He's had some opportunities in pass pro going back to training camp, but he was getting better. So I'm really interested to see how they use him in the formation, running, potentially behind him and Hurst. And then if Pete does play, that could be a strength for this team, especially in the screen game, if they can cut it loose and such a little bit. But, in short yardage, Taysom and package, I think it works really well.
Yeah, I would love to see that. And I said it, earlier this week. I think at this point, any snaps you start getting him, in any capacity, that's a huge win considering what happened in the preseason, him going down. So that's great news. You talked about this 49ers offense. You look at it. You see Deebo Samuel. You see Christian McCaffrey, which, funny enough, when he got traded, your first thought is, hey, you don't have to play him the second time you play the Panthers. Well, you still got to face him a second time this season. And even if you bottle them up, still got to worry about Brandon Ayuk and then also George Kittle. They just have weapons for days on San Francisco's lineup. The main thing for me is just you got to pressure Jimmy Garoppolo. He's a guy who hasn't had a pick over the last 3 games. And is he the most explosive quarterback? Absolutely not. But when he takes that game-managing style offense, that's when the Niners are at their best. What's the confidence level in the defensive line? Because even though they've been revolving guys in, I was really impressed with how they finished that Rams game in particular, back-to-back sacks towards the end, and other guys stepping up, even a Caden Ellis, in blitz situations, he's looked great. So where's your confidence level at in them getting pressure on Jimmy G?
Yeah, I think that's got to be the focal point here is disrupt his timing, get him off of his game and get off his rhythm. And obviously, the coaching side of it, that they're extremely well coached on as far as San Francisco goes and that offense. And so, look, it's going to be a situation where, again, you're going to have to be a little bit aggressive. You're going to have to get him off the timing and rhythm. But, again, tackling is going to be the biggest thing here is because you can't completely shut down this 49ers offense, I feel like, especially with how well they've been playing. But defensively, the Saints have just got to kind of pick their battles, if you will. And so, look, Christian McCaffrey is a guy that they're familiar with, but I think Deebo Samuel is obviously a versatile weapon. You can throw him pretty much wherever you want to in formation, and he's going to find success. And so, But Ayuk, I mean, he had a big game last week. Kittle had a big game last week against the Cardinals. And these are areas where the Saints have got to figure out, how they're going to work. I expect them to do a lot of nickel today. And again, that's one of those that, is that a Roby, the veteran, or you go to Chris Harris, who's been playing, and he was looking good until we said he looked good, and then, didn't. But that was really a thing where, you got to get him safety help over the top if he's going to go against a guy like Tutu Atwell and stuff. But, look, that's coverage breakdowns. That's different types of stories. But I think tackling is the first and foremost big thing here, and then getting the pressure after Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be huge. Again, bend don't break. I think that's the message that Demario Davis has preached a lot here, and comparing them the other week to like palm trees is that they sustain a lot, they bend a lot, they just don't break. And so that's what the Saints are going to have to do is, 49ers are going to put up some points, but when it counts, stall them out in the red zone, force field goal situations, and offensively, you got to get something going. Whether it's getting Chris Olave going, getting Jarvis Landry more involved, getting that run game going with Alvin Kamara, using some Taysom packages. It doesn't matter what, just make it work.
Yeah, and I think this has been an issue for many portions of the season, but I think one thing that will be on display today, and if the Saints are going to pull off the upset, and it sounds like a no-brainer, but it's the truth, they got to tackle better. And I think the one thing the Niners do so well is they have so many guys yards after the catch. That's where they kind of specialize. Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey. So we'll see what happens there. We saw last time when they had the shootout with the Niners, obviously tackling Kittle seemed kind of optional that day. So we'll see if it changes this time around. We talked about kind of the defense, what they need to do. You mentioned the offense towards the end right there. And it's one of those stats where you look at it, you just can't believe it. But the 49ers, the last 3 weeks, in the second half, they haven't given up a single point. So DeMeco Ryans, what he's been able to do, second half adjustments, clearly it's working. No points given up to the Rams, none to the Chargers, and then none to the Cardinals on Monday night. I think Pete Carmichael has actually done a lot better than people think. I think there's moments where he really gets it going. But how much of this game does fall on his shoulders, right? Because we talked about it. The Niners have a lot of weapons. This is a game where you can't really afford to have a lot of turnovers because the Niners will probably make you pay. How much of this game kind of falls on his shoulders to make sure he's kind of managing everything, keeping them on schedule? That's been a big thing for the Saints. When they're ahead of the chains, great. When they fall behind, obviously it gets a little dicey. How much of this kind of falls on him?
I think it does. I mean, that second level of the 49ers is outstanding. Their linebacking core is really stellar. And obviously, what they bring is a pass rush. Not having Arik Armstead's going to be a little bit of a deficiency there. But, look, they have guys that can play in that position and do extremely well there too. But, look, I think Pete's got to call a pretty good game. And again, last week we saw him be a little bit more aggressive. And I think that's the thing is be aggressive. Do what you got to do as far as pulling out the stops and pulling out some tricks. Danny Dalton touched on it last week, and it's really about the timing aspect. And they faced Aaron Donald, but they did a pretty good job against him, not allowing a sack with Aaron Donald. Now it came from guys like Leonard Floyd and all those others, but it's just that you're going to have to find ways to get that timing, and whether it's the route concepts or just the timing aspect, I think that's going to be big for the Saints offense today. But Pete Carmichael, look, dial up some things, you stick with what works, the Taysom things working, the Alvin Kamara, get him going a little bit in the pass out of the backfield. I mean, he's, people make a lot about Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, but Alvin Kamara is a big weapon. Use him. Do what you got to do to get him the ball. And Olave and Landry are going to have to shoulder the load. Juwan Johnson's been a hot hand, especially in the red zone. I think you can lean on him a good bit. But look, for Pete, I feel like this team at 4-7, you've got to pull out all the stops. You can't play conservative. You've got to take some chances, take some shots, be a little bit more the aggressive. And this is where I think Pete Carmichael can shine. And when they call him the mad scientist, Crazy Pete, or whatever you want to call him, this is where he can shine a bit and match up against the 49ers defense well.
Yeah, and you talked about him getting creative. They did have that trick play last week that was dialed up. It just, the execution wasn't there. But the play was there for the taking, so maybe they'll have something there. Before we end this, 2 questions here. One of them is going to be a quick one. If you had to kind of guess here, CMC, Alvin Kamara, who has more total yards?
I think it's Kamara. I think CMC is can be used as a guy that maybe is more of a decoy today. And maybe I say that, Deebo Samuel is coming in with a hamstring injury. He is supposed to be able to play without limitations from my understanding, but that's something obviously to watch. But Christian McCaffrey is a guy that, the Saints defense is well aware of and they're going to account for. But I just think that, when you look at the Saints, whether, hopefully they don't get in a situation where they get down because that kind of abandons things. But I think Kamara can be more of a weapon out of the passing game here for the Saints over McCaffrey today, just because San Francisco can spread the ball out a little bit more. And then as far as the running game goes, look, yards might be a premium, but again, I think that with Kamara and just him not being as big of a factor in getting some of these guys back would be huge for this offensive line. I think that Kamara can have the bigger day. It's going to be an uphill battle for both guys, but I'll take Kamara in this one.
Yeah, I kind of think that's like the safer bet right now, especially with the the abundance of weapons the Niners got there. Last thing, John, before we kind of end it, I think this game is interesting because I think on one hand, if the Saints do pull off the upset, all of a sudden we start changing the way we look at them maybe a little bit. Am I wrong to say, though, if they do lose, right, depending on how the score is, like if they lose by, I know there's no moral victories, but they go out there, they battle against the 49ers, they lose, let's say, by a field goal, whatever. I can still make the argument, and I've been more pessimistic than most this year. Their next two games are more important than this one. With Bucks and Falcons coming up, you got to win your division games. But looking at this one, win or lose, would it kind of change the way you view this team?
I think it can. A win today would say, okay, this team can be for real and they have a chance, right? I think that's the biggest thing, is that they would have a big opportunity. Now, if they lose today, and depending on what else happens around the league, that's going to be something to pay attention to, obviously. But, look, I think that it could shape up pretty well. And, of course, this is the main focus, and this is where you're at in the season. You got to win first. And if you put up forth a valiant effort against a team that's been so heavily favored, I think there's some encouragement there for sure on the back stretch. But, your hope goes down to, okay, you're going to have to steal a road game against Cleveland. You're going to have to steal a road game against the Eagles. And the Eagles, maybe you're hoping that they've already got the first round bye locked up and you're playing against backups. That might be the hope there. But, there is some time still to turn this thing around. It's just that your window and margin for error in missing is so minute right now. And so I think the Saints team is, as long as they can put forth a good effort, not get too behind, because again, that's the thing, is if you get this team in a 2-possession, 2-score deficit, I don't think they have enough to pull it out and come from behind. If it was Drew, maybe, if it was different, maybe, I don't know, but they're going to have to get some things to go their way, get some turnovers if they do get down. I mean, this is just things where they have to play a complete game in all 3 phases and such. And they can't play any other way. They have to play a darn near complete game in all phases to stand a chance. But look, if they lose only to a couple, or they lose last second, I still feel like that's a kind of a moral victory. But again, the next 2 games, division opponents, definitely count for double. If they can win those, that means a lot for the division outlook. But we'll just have to see if they can take care of business first. Because if they win today, I feel like I can be a believer and get on. Okay, this team maybe can make a run to try to get to the division.
Yeah, and how big would that make next Monday night's game against the Bucks? Because then all of a sudden you start looking around, whether people want to say it or not. You start looking at the division and say, okay, there's a path there. So we'll see what happens. Saints, 49ers. Saints are massive underdogs in this one. We'll see if they can get off to a hot start. And we all know 49ers play better in the second half, so Saints got to take advantage early while they can. We'll see what happens, though. Could they pull off the upset? We'll have to wait and find out.